Hi everyone, Eve Harow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. It is March 19th, 2024, the 9th day of Adar, the second month of Adar, Adar Bet, 5784. Approaching Purim, the holiday of God being hidden, but everywhere. If you're looking for him, he's everywhere. You can see in the book of Esther, which we read, he's not mentioned, but you could also say that all the events that happen are just a matter of coincidence and of timing, or you can see a larger plan. And that's so much like where we are today, where it just looks like a confluence of events, most of them not great. Or is there a bigger picture going on here for those of us who see it? And because nothing makes sense if there isn't that bigger picture and if there isn't a plan. So Purim is perhaps more meaningful than ever this year. We're still going to be happy. It's also usually the crazy holiday here. I remember it was like, I think it was the day before Purim, but people were already dressing up, and I picked tourists up at the airport in those days where there were tourists to Israel. And I picked people up, and we're driving to Jerusalem, I think, and a big bumblebee crosses in front of us at the crosswalk, and Superman and Spider-Man and all kinds of wild costumes. And they looked at me and they said, what is going on here? Like, we knew, everyone told us that Israel was going to be this incredible experience and a country like no other, but what is happening? So we had to explain about Purim, because Purim is masked. Purim is masked. It's what you see is not what there necessarily is. And it's turned into probably the most fun holiday on the Jewish calendar. Who doesn't love dressing up? Who doesn't love taking a moment out to be what you wanted to be but can't be necessarily? Like, I usually wear a dark curly wig, but that's a small thing. And again, in terms of the books that we read, the Megillat Esther, the book of Esther that we read, a lot of political meaning in that book as well. I remember many years ago reading, and now other people have written books a lot in that genre, Yoram Chazoni, his book on the political reading of the book of Esther, how Mordechai is doing, well, what Joseph did before him, what Joseph did before him as number two to the Pharaoh, but also kind of keeping his people safe, at least temporarily, by being important to whoever the ruler is and being loyal to whoever the ruler is, but on the side. And that's a story that repeated itself way through generations in Europe and in other places where our existence as a community hinged on the largesse or whatever it was, the needing us for some reason of whoever was the local ruler or the major ruler. So many messages. And the one that resonates for me, and not only for me, is what Mordechai says to Esther at some point. Maybe it's for this time that you got to be the queen. Meaning that we all work hard, or many of us work hard, and we get to a certain position, and to some degree we deserve the position that we're in because we have put in the time. But there's always those factors that predicate failure or success. And if we look around and we think, I'm in this certain position in order that I can help my people, I can help the world of Torah, I can help the word of God, then that is something else entirely. When you realize that it's not just due to your hard work, but you have a mission in your life in order to spread that word, and that's what you really need to be doing at that particular time. And if people are listening to you, or you have a position of influence or power or money or whatever it is that allows you to be that good force in the world. I was babysitting last night for my grandchildren, and one of them said to me, because he's 10, he's very bright. And we were talking about the different religions and how each religion has in it beautiful things, really beautiful things. And at the core, a connection with God. And he said to me, so what would you say, Tata? That's what they call me. What would you say is the main mission of Judaism? And I thought about it for a second, and I said, making the world a better place. We have a job to do. And we do believe in the goodness of mankind, but it comes to a point where it has been proven to us, because they have uncles fighting in this war, when it comes to us, when it comes down to it, and the evil is right in front of us, that's our mission as well. In order to make the world a better place, we all have to work on being better people. But there are certain people whose entire existence is to kill the good people, us first, but everybody else afterwards. Then we have to make sure that they can no longer do that. And that's part of making the world a better place. So and it just came out. He said, really, like not Shabbat and being kosher and all that? I said, that's the framework with which we function, because it gives us the strength and the deeper connection to God and the deeper connection to people, and building a community and understanding the importance of everybody finding their role in what we're doing, because we all have a gift and you have to find it and use it in a positive way. And I said, so those are the things that we were given specifically that other people weren't given to do, in order to enable us, whether we understand it or not, to fulfill that role. But that's not our place in the world to bring Shabbat to everybody. As much as I love Shabbat and I think it's amazing, Shabbat was given to the Jews, and within that, an understanding in order to be able to act in the ways that we need to act, and to bring the beauty of Hashem and of His Torah to everyone else. I think he understood. I hoped he understood. I was babysitting for them because their parents got away for a few days, needing to recover a little bit from the 4 months that my son was serving and not really at home. And that's also why I wasn't at the funeral yesterday of Daniel Perez, who is the son of Rav Doron and Shelly Perez. And that's what I'm actually going to be doing. The rest of this show is going to be a rebroadcast of an interview that I did with Rav Doron a while back when his book came out. And that book, it was more important. I wanted to go to the funeral, but it was more important to babysit for my grandchildren. Only that was a role that not many other people could fill. So their other grandmother had them for a while. One of my daughters was with them for a while, but there were a lot of people at the funeral. And for those of you who don't remember or haven't heard, so Rav Doron Perez is the chairman of World Mizrahi, the organization that represents religious Zionism. His book was awesome, and that's why I interviewed him on it. And if you missed the first round, you'll get to hear it now. His son, Daniel, was apparently killed on October 7th. He was in a tank. There were 4 people in the tank, only one of whom was found on October 7th. He'd been killed. The assumption was that the other 3 had been taken hostage into Gaza. It was announced just last week that one of them had been officially declared dead, and his body is being held by Hamas. And then it was announced that it was confirmed, and they do not confirm unless they are 100% sure. I've talked to the people who are tasked with the unbelievable holy work of bringing confirmation to the families who are so tortured, if their loved ones are alive or not. And it was confirmed finally that Daniel was also, his body's being held by Hamas, but there was enough, whatever, I don't want to get into it, enough proof that he could no longer be alive. And so the funeral was yesterday. The family is sitting Shiva. And the eulogies for him really... And eulogies are always going to talk about the great things, but knowing his family, knowing his father, and the main message of the book was unity. And this book came out last July, came out before October 7th. There is an expression in Hebrew, I think I've mentioned it before, that you know somebody, bekiso, bekoso, bakaso, how he is with money, meaning the true personality of someone, how he behaves with money. I've lost friends over that issue. How he is when he's angry, his true personality comes out, and how he or she, for that matter, behave when they're drunk. And I've said for a long time that that's missing what I see here, a very, very important thing, and it alliterates so nicely in Hebrew. So I found the word that most closely fits with kiso, ka'aso, v'koso, which is ke'evo, which is in pain or in grief. But the grief that we're experiencing here in Israel, and the grief especially of the families of the fallen soldiers, of the hostages, of so many here, is, it doesn't really fit. Ke'eva is not deep enough. It's more like yagon or tsa'ar, like absolute agony is the better word. But Rav Doron Perez has been, in the last few months, when he didn't know what had happened to his son, and another one of his sons had also been very badly wounded, but then on October 7th, but recovered and was married. He has, in every speech that he's given, in every talk that he's given, in every words of Torah that he has passed along, he has only been a message of faith, of unity, of hope. He has strengthened other people, even though I can't even imagine the emotional state that he himself was in. But that is when you really tell the essence of a person. So not having known Daniel, now not having the chance, but knowing the family, the framework in which he was raised, the home in which he was raised, I can only imagine what a great loss it is to the Jewish people. And so this show is in his memory. Platoon Commander Daniel Perez, and in honor of his family and the strength that they have shown to the rest of Am Yisrael, and that they will continue to do so, and the faith, and in the hope that the message of the book of unity and of the importance also of religious Zionism, which is what we're seeing here in this war. These are the people who have managed somehow to combine Torah learning with tremendous devotion to our faith and to our traditions, and have borne the brunt of that in the sacrifices on the battlefield, way out of proportion to our numbers. And I'm humbled to consider myself a part of that camp, the people who see the we and the nation and have put that before the personal, an incredibly and ridiculously difficult thing to do. So that is going to be today's broadcast. Hopefully next week for Purim, we'll be able to put out something more joyous, maybe a miracle, just like happened to the Jews of Shushan, where they actually got the permission and rose up to end the people, the anti-Semites who wanted to destroy us. Wow, it's like amazing. You could read the book of Esther is like totally out of today's news. And the too many people, including people who should definitely know better, who control some of the biggest and most important countries in the world, whose messaging has come out really against the Jewish people. If you're against Israel, you're against Jewish people. It's pretty clear. And if you're interfering in what we're doing here, on the one hand, you can't say like, it can't be that to be a democracy means that you have to fight wars against terrorists in a way that they're not fighting, literally with one hand tied behind your back, because we're following international law and they are following no law whatsoever. It cannot be that organizations like the Red Cross and UNRWA get away without helping our hostages while they're so worried about the people in Gaza, who, by the way, are not starving. They're getting more food in than they did before. And so there's a lot of really bad things happening out there. And that we're still fighting and still going to be fighting. But what's interesting is that the book of Esther happens outside the land of Israel. It's really a holiday that we celebrate for an event that happened outside the land. And that because that's where the locus and the focus of Jewish life was after the destruction of the first temple. But by the time the book of Esther happens, the Jews have already started to return to the land of Israel. Yet it's before, we're still confused. It's before the times of Ezra and Nehemiah, before the rebuilding. I mean, it's starting, but it hasn't really taken off, the rebuilding of the Second Temple, and before really solidifying Israel, the land of Israel, as the center, once again, of the Jewish people for many, 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 many centuries. It's out in Babylon, it's out in other places, moves all the way around. Should it be alive now in 5784? to be a part of the rejuvenation of the people of Israel in our land. I still sit with that every single day. And if that isn't the biggest miracle that maybe ever was, then I don't know what it is. But it comes with a price that we're paying, a price that this week the Perez family paid. But they did it for all of us. So wishing them some kind of solace in their grief and gratitude, if that's a word I can even use, for the sacrifice that they have made so that I can be sitting here in the Judean hills in the pouring rain, as it happens, and be putting out a podcast for people all around the world as a very, very, very proud Jew living in Judea and doing what I can and to make the bad go away and the good finally take precedence. So thank you all for listening. Thanks to Ben and to Tabitha, as usual, for putting this show out and praying for V'nhafochu, for the ultimate flip, where beheref ayin, in one blink of an eye, everything can change. It happened so long ago in Purim, in the Purim story, and it can happen again if we just have faith and we ourselves do whatever it is that we can, and hopefully not paying that terrible price that the Perez family paid. So to unity and to faith and to keeping our eye on the ultimate, which is that Jewish people are back in our land, and those who support us here will be blessed. And those who don't, well, I don't know, but I'm glad I'm not there. Harow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. Enjoy the rebroadcast. Take care, everyone. Purim Sameach, and goodbye for now. I have on the line with me now Rabbi Doron Perez, who is the head of Mizrahi here in Israel, but he wrote a wonderful book. And I don't say that lightly. It's called The Jewish State, From Opposition to Opportunity. And quite honestly, Rav Doron, when I took the book, I thought, okay, this is going to be, it's going to be an interesting book, but I've read so many books about Israel, about the Jewish state and what's going on. And I interviewed Michael Oren last month and about the challenges we have. And I have to say how pleasantly surprised I was by the book and about how cogently and clearly you write down all the issues. So first of all, welcome to Rejuvenation. I know you've had a long and busy day, so thank you so much. I'll tell the listeners, he's in his car because once he goes home, another kind of chaos breaks loose. So he's sitting in his car to give us some peace and quiet. And I so appreciate you finding a few minutes for me and for my listeners. So first of all, welcome to Rejuvenation.
Thank you so much, Eve. It's a real honor and privilege to be with you on Rejuvenation. So firstly, I hope the listeners forgive my South African accent. Indeed, it's a South African accent and not everyone is familiar with it.
I love the South African accent. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. So it's an honor and privilege to be with you. And it's, it doesn't matter how long the day is, like you, I just absolutely love what I do. And just having the privilege of living in Israel and feeling that you're just part of Jewish history and Jewish destiny and human destiny for that matter, it's just such an unbelievable privilege. You've got to pinch yourself that and literally every day of the pleasure of being here. So it's just so wonderful, and it's an honor to be with you. And you are one of our top tour guides as well, and educators, and we travel together around the world as well on different events that we have. So it's an honor and privilege and forums to be with you on this podcast. Thank you for hosting me.
Well, so for my listeners who don't know what the Mizrahi organization is, and I have to say that my grandparents, who passed away a long time ago, they were members of Mizrahi way back in, oh my God, it must be the 1940s, the 1950s. So this is an organization with deep roots and really has been re-inspired, I would say, here in the last few years, not in small part to what you're doing. So maybe let's give a little background of what exactly the Mizrahi or the Religious Zionist organization is.
Thank you very much for the question. So, of course, the Mizrahi movement, firstly, most people know the word Mizrahi in its other meaning. It means often Jews of a Sephardic background, right, from the more Arab and Spanish countries. So where, if one Googles Mizrahi, you often find a Mizrahi type of Jew, which is the Sephardic Jews, but that's not what our Mizrahi, of course, is. Our Mizrahi is an acronym for the very first and longest surviving and flourishing religious Zionist movement of the modern era. We all know that when Herzl founded the World Zionist Organization, just over 125 years ago in 1897, many Orthodox religious Jews, as we know, did not quite know what to do with this movement. I don't think they envisaged the image of some type of messianic figure in the figure of Herzl, who wasn't an observant Jew. And he was a man who initiated an organization which has gone on to fulfill so many biblical prophecies, to the ingathering of the exiles, the restoration of Jews from all around the world. As we know, of this last day of independence, there's now 7 million Jews living in the land of Israel, almost 10 million civilians. Never been so many Jews living in the land of Israel. And the restoration of Jewish sovereignty, the ingathering of the exiles, is probably the most salient prophecy of all biblical prophecies. And therefore, when Herzl founded this, on the one hand, it was unleashing a movement to bring Jews back to the Holy Land. On the other hand, it was, it had a sort of secular nationalist nature, which is not quite the religious sort of, let's call it, language and packaging that people were expecting. So many religious Orthodox Jews did not quite know what to do with it and kept it at arm's length. But there were many rabbinic and religious leaders who believed that despite some of the challenges and complexity, the Zionist endeavor needs to be partnered with, and religious Jews should be part of it. So they founded a movement just over 120 years ago called Mizrahi. It's an acronym for Merkaz Ruchani, which means spiritual center. And essentially, they saw their role as partnering with the Zionist endeavor from within. If you want to change and be a part of something, then you need to be on the inside, and bringing it back to its spiritual center, to its biblical and religious roots. And essentially, that's what Mizrahi is for over 120 years now, connecting Jews around the world and in Israel in a profound way to supporting the Zionist endeavor, supporting the state of Israel, and showing that there is no contradiction between Zionism and religiosity, hence religious Zionism. There need be no contradiction between nationalism and religiosity, between the rebuilding of Jewish statehood and its spiritual roots. And essentially that is the main aim of the Mizrahi movement, to see the spiritual, biblical, deep religious nature of the state of Israel and its role in Jewish and human destiny.
So on a practical sense, because I, of course, also identify myself as a religious Zionist, it's a major reason, of course, that I came to live in Israel, because I felt that it wasn't just my destiny. It would have been hypocritical of me to live any other way. The most difficult and the most amazing decision I ever made in my entire life. But it's not without its difficulties and contradictions, precisely because of how you described it. Because you look around and Israel the Messiah is not here yet. The temple isn't built. And there are still many Jews, many quite Orthodox Jews, who don't accept this as the third commonwealth, shall we say, because of those reasons, right? But on the other hand, we're surrounded with incredible Jews who are not necessarily Torah Jews, even though many of them are more than they think they are, but they wouldn't define themselves as religious. And so there's this group of us in the middle. And how does it go? Who said this? Yosef Berg, that the most important part of religious Zionism was actually the hyphen that bridges them. Maybe you can elaborate on that balance between, for example, my sons went to the army. My children went to the army because we feel very much that this state needs to be protected, that this modern state is the beginnings, very much so, of the ultimate redemption. And we have to do all of our part, work, pay taxes, but also do the difficult things like the army. But also blend that with a Torah lifestyle, with making time to learn Torah, with living a religious lifestyle. So how would you define that balance, which is, as any kind of balance, is not an easy one to maintain? So some of our kids have gone one direction and some have emphasized the other. So how do you, as really, I would say, the head of the premier organization A lot of the children of this camp, in terms of being able to blend the two in a world that, as my listeners know, no matter where they live, has a lot of different pressures and pulls in many, many different directions, not always all of them in the direction of God, let's say, or religious lifestyle.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think you've touched on the biggest, I'd say, almost the salient challenge of life. There's no doubt that sometimes it's a lot simpler to be one-dimensional and monolithic, to say, I live in a religious world, and let me just let me be a purist and live in that way, or I live in a secular world and let me be a purist. And I think exactly what you said, indeed, in the name of the iconic head of the Mizrahi movement for many decades ago, Dr. Joseph Berg, exactly what you said, where he said the essence of the religious Zionist ideology is not the religious or the Zionist, it's the dash, the hyphen, which joins them, which I think first and foremost goes to the essence of our religious philosophy, which is that the Torah is a Torah Chaim, it's a Torah of life. The whole essence of the Torah is how does it relate to all the vicissitudes of human life, the physical side, the emotional side, the spiritual side. It engages every part of life, and therefore the Torah is bringing it to life. We all know that the Torah is full of engaging with sovereignty, with the political side, with the the army and the military, Parshat Kitetze and Shoftim. It engages, right? King David waged wars. It was an unfortunate necessity of life to defend our life and our way of life. So the Torah, as we know, has rules. And your military camp should be holy, and you need to aspire to serve God also in the unlikely situation where life is challenging. It's just easier. I think we see around the world somehow a more extreme one-dimensional monolithic view of the world is in many ways easier. The late chief rabbi of South Africa, his name is Rabbi Cyril Harris, he used to say you take what you call the maximalistic approach, not the minimalistic. There's a maximalist approach which tries to embrace everything. And I think that's what religious Zionism is all about. And that it's challenging. There's no doubt it's challenging. It is not easy to be a Torah observant Jew and serve in the Israeli army, to serve in any army for that matter. It's not always so straightforward to be in academia and to be religious. It's not always so simple in all areas of life. But that I think is the essence of a Torah Chaim. A person has to try and be that dash which it's not simple. It's not simple. And that's what makes life challenging. I would say, the older I get, the more I see that life is about balance. How difficult is it to be growing as an individual, to be a good spouse, if one is blessed to be a good child, to be a good parent. And even if you're a good parent, you've got to be a good parent to each one of your kids. It doesn't, you can succeed with one kid, not with another. And even once you've got all of that balance right, then you want to be good in your community and in your job, in society. There's so many balancing acts and there's so many roles that we fulfill. And so often in life, we succeed in one and are struggle in the other. So I think life is a balancing act. And I think our ideology is one where we try and strike this balance. It might be easier to say, there's secular Israel, which is easy to be part of, or there's religious Israel, it's easy to be part of. To say we want to be part of both and to somehow bring them together, I think it's more challenging. But I think that's the maximalist and the ideal way.
So one of the things that's gone on in the last few years, and I think your book, if I may be so chutzpahdik to say so, is kind of an outgrowth of that, is an emphasis on Mizrahi, on that kind of education. And you didn't quit even with COVID, and I was involved with virtual things that we did, and you have now inspired hundreds of educators that went out a few weeks ago to different parts of the world to bring people who live here, to bring the challenges and the inspiration of exactly that balance out to the world. Was that, did you look around and say, this message is not going out? It's a wonderful organization, but it needs now to tweak for the current world, for the massive amounts of information that people are getting, that most of it is wrong, or via the internet and the communication. There has never been communication the way there is today. But how do you filter through? How do you know what's right, what's wrong, what's the living Torah, what's the wisdom of the ages? So How did you, in the last few years, make that decision? And really, I'm sure it is a tremendous amount of work. There are so many balls in the air at any given time. I see what's going on. How do you have that? You have a staff of people, you have a board.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah. So, I think everything comes down, Eve, to relevance. You have to be relevant. If you're not relevant, then you don't have a role to play. So I think for us, I must be honest, I think, I was very privileged for many years to be the head of Mizrahi in South Africa. I was a community rabbi, head of the school, and ran the organization there. And I knew what I needed in South Africa. And what I've tried to do in this new role at World Mizrahi, where I've been since coming back from South Africa 9 years ago, is give to communities around the world what I felt I lacked, and to be part of the change instead of complaining about it, which means I think the main shift, Eve, was the fact that as a religious Zionist organization, any Zionist organization, we're very focused on Israel because we're Zionists and Israel is where we focus. But I think what we see is from so many of the Mizrahi type communities around the world, our single-minded focus on Israel, like you had said, the greatest decision you've made in your life is moving to Israel, and me too. And we passionately want to be in Israel and be part of it. But we know that if there's 7 million Jews who live in Israel, there's a similar amount who live outside of Israel, facing tremendous challenges of identity and assimilation, challenges today on campuses throughout the United States and in many places of even being overtly supportive of Israel. You've got to, as we know, is a major challenge. And that, so I think the first shift for us was said, we need to have a message for our communities around the world, not only to talk to us living in Israel, and obviously with speakers such as yourself and many hundreds of super competent speakers to travel regularly to communities around the world. In fact, as we speak, there are about 10 speakers leaving for France. We send speakers all the time to different communities. We're part of the English-speaking communities, but there's also a massive community in France, as we know, and many others. And so number one is engaging educators and people who can inspire to dispatch them to communities around the world. Number one. Number two, of course, in the internet information age, we can connect in so many ways. And of course, as we know, during COVID, that's all we could do. And therefore, that's really, so we as Mizrahi had to sort of adapt to that reality and create what we call this virtual, international Beit Midrash of learning, because that's all there was. And it's basically being relevant. So once the idea was to be relevant to the millions of Jews and all those around the world, non-Jews as well, who are looking to, to connect to Israel in a meaningful and to deepen the spiritual connection, but meaning in today's day and age, you can be relevant in so many ways, not only through speakers and not only through, through the human touch, but also through the virtual internet world. So that's really, I think, what we try to do is just once we refocused and said, what, we've got a message out there. There's so many millions around the world who want to deepen their connection to Israel, deepen their Jewish identity, deepen their Zionist identity. Let's try and serve them in the most meaningful way. And I think everything flowed from that. And then you adapt to the situation. When you can send shlichim emissaries, you send them. And when you've got to work, only online, you work online. And you've probably got to do a little bit of everything. I think the key for me was being relevant to Jews, to people around the world, to those around the world, Jews and Gentiles around the world, whoever wants to connect with Israel, right, in a meaningful and deep spiritual way. Let's offer something which is meaningful and deep. And as you remember, when people could not visit Israel, so we created all these virtual, tours. Like you were so much part of that, So so you can't come and visit Israel, but here maybe with Eve Harow, she can take you around places in Israel that you would never otherwise be able to. I can tell you, Eve, if you remember, we did the on Tisha B'Av, the tragic day of the destruction. We read, of course, the kinot, these not lamentations, what a kinot in English, I don't know. These type of there's a word for them. These type of poems about the destruction of the temple and the tragedies of Jewish history that we read on the fast and the day of mourning when the temples were destroyed. So that first Tisha B'Av, there were people who said they sat for the first time. They couldn't even go to shul. They couldn't even attend synagogue. They sat in their homes. And one person wrote to me, she's a professor, senior educator. She said, Doron, I feel bad saying this, but this was the best Tisha B'Av I ever had, meaning it was the most It was the most meaningful. I sat in my home in the United States, in this particular city, not knowing how I'm going to connect. And all of a sudden, your 15 tours of places in Israel and around the world of where people, where there was Jewish suffering. And she said, I cannot tell you what this did for my experience of Tisha B'Av. So there's often opportunities in these challenges, and I think it's reading the situation and seeing how you can be relevant in any given set of circumstances.
So I remember that. I think I did it on Beitar, about the destruction of Beitar. And yeah, I know that it was very moving for me and for all of those who were involved, because we realized that at that time and place where people couldn't come to Israel, we were connecting people with something that was so much bigger than we were, because we were stuck here. And we were able to go to the places where certain things had happened and be able to give that messaging out, because there's such a tremendous power of place to this land, because this is where it happened. This is where it's still happening and will continue to happen for a very long time. I don't want to keep you for too long, but first of all, I really want to recommend the book to all my listeners, both Jews and non-Jews. I thought I knew pretty much everything that was going on here, and it turns out that I learned a lot from the book, which was absolutely tremendous. It's easy to read. It's not long-winded, and you really distill the arguments, and distill not even the arguments, but you put out the challenges and you put out the good things as well as the things that we still have to work on. But towards the end of the book, you have a line that I thought was absolutely fascinating. This book has been less about geopolitics and more about metaphysics. There ought to be a third way in the spiritual realm too. We have argued that this may indeed be the ultimate spiritual key to the problems facing the Jewish people in the world, and that every one of us can do something about it. And you go on to say something that I deeply believe, that the story of Israel is the story of mankind. This isn't just a little country with some Jewish people who managed to survive endless persecutions and running around the world. And through God's tremendous love for us, he brought us home, and we're holding the line, and it's not so easy. How would you explain that? About how well, you actually quote the historian Paul Johnson,
so I think
that Israel is a
Paul Johnson, as you know, a religious observant Catholic and one of the internationally recognized outstanding historians. He himself writes in his introduction to the history of the Jews, he says, one of the reasons I wrote this book is to also only appreciate what the Jews have done for humanity, but what the Jews have done, it's knowing my own roots as a Christian, which is based on the Hebrew Bible, even the foundations which also led to the Christian faith as well. And he says the most unbelievable thing, as you quoted in his epilogue. He says, the Jewish people are the pilot project for humanity. Somehow, whatever happens to the Jewish people is somehow linked to human destiny. I think it also explains, Eve, this irrational obsession with Israel. I mean, here we've got this tiny little country with this tiny little people, less than 1/5 of 1%. I've yet to find one map, any map where you can write the words Israel and fit them into Israel. You're starting Greece and you're in Afghanistan. This tiny little country, the size of New Jersey and El Salvador, as we know. And yet, this tiny people and tiny country, a house built in A1 or E1 causes a ripple effect anywhere around the world. Judicial reform. Does anybody care or know about any internal issue of any other country yet? An internal issue facing the Jewish people, the state of Israel, has become something almost every prime minister and foreign minister feels the need to say something about. There's an obsession with Israel. Jews on news. And it seems to be because, and also, by the way, Rabbi Kook, I base a lot on the writings of Rabbi Kook, the famous founding rabbi, rabbinate of Free State Israel. He writes an amazing thing, and I quoted in the book in the beginning of Lights of Israel, or Rosh Israel. He says, not only the Jewish people, the pilot project of humanity, which is what Johnson says, Rav Kook says, it's the essence, it's almost the microcosm, the nucleus of what's happening in the world. It's almost crystallizing all this. Rav Kook says every issue going on in the world, you somehow find in a mini concentrated way in Israel. You can find the biggest atheists in Israel and the most religious fundamentalists. You can find in Israel, the Jewish people and in Israel, the biggest capitalists and the biggest socialists, left and right, religious, irreligious. Somehow all the views are crystallized into one into this sort of concentrate. And, says Rav Kook, we get it right, where the whole world is almost projecting their issues onto us. They're looking at this mirror of themselves, perhaps sometimes forgiving themselves for much larger indiscretions, but not forgiving Israel, because somehow the world understands, whether they're conscious or not conscious of it, is that what happens in Israel really impacts on the rest of the world. And if Israel can get the judicial reform right, and if Israel can get the balance between secular and religious right, and if Israel can get the balance between left and right, every country almost today in the Western world is roiled between left and right. I was actually reading a fascinating, I heard a lecture where they said even in the United States, about 30 years ago, they asked Democrats and Republicans, would it bother them if their children married somebody from, the Democrats married Republicans and the other way around? 7% said it would bother them. Today, even it's over 50%. 50% of either side says they would not want their children to marry. 50%. Meaning we've got this situation today where the world is being so divided between one in a monolithic way. And I think the world is roiled and divided. Israel's roiled and divided. But the aim of the book was to do two things. Firstly was to understand, the first part of the book, which I'll touch on briefly, was aiming to understand why the state of Israel has elicited so much Israel. Meaning, how did Zionism elicit so much anti-Zionism? And how did anti-Semitism mutate? Because we know Herzl writes in his diaries, he says, the new state of Israel, which will happen, the state of the Jews, will solve the problem of anti-Semitism. But all it really did was it mutated and created a new type, which is anti-Jewish state or anti-Israel. That's the first part of the book. And that's what I call opposition to the Jewish state. But I called it from opposition to opportunity, because I think the big opportunity we have in Israel is if Israel can create unity from within. I called it a vision for unity in Israel and why the world needs it. If Israel can create this unity between all these, what we said, religious and secular, statehood and spirituality, between the national, universal, all the different things which divide us and divide humanity, if we can get it right between a Jewish and democratic state, all of these things, I think the whole world is focused on it because they understand that this is really their story in a nutshell. And if this fits into place, it can be some type of pilot project, for example, for the rest of humanity. So I think that is the tremendous responsibility that God has bestowed upon the Jewish people. He says, Atem Eidai, you are my witnesses. You are here to give testimony that godliness and spirituality can blend in the world. You can get this balance right. It's not easy. But and I think that is the aim. We also know that the word Yisrael, Israel, right, is the one who struggled with man and with God and succeeded. The whole purpose of Jude is the struggle. Jacob becomes Israel when he struggles both with human forces and divine forces. And that's really the struggle. Can we bring the human story and the divine story together? That's ultimately the story of the Jewish people. That's what the Hebrew Bible is all about. That's what, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He revealed himself to human beings and was hoping that humanity, and eventually became through this pilot project of Abraham and his progeny, the Jewish people, could be those witnesses to say, you know what, we can bring it together. We can make it all, the secular and spiritual, work together. It's a tremendous responsibility, and that's the great privilege that we have. And what a privilege it is to have a state of Israel today, a renewed commonwealth, struggling with all of these issues, but just being such a light on so many areas. Yes, there's darkness. Light have shadows as well. Light casts shadows as well, and there's challenge. But what a pleasure and a privilege. And I think we are dealing and struggling with the very essence of Jewish and human destiny, and what a privilege.
Yes, and the organization that you represent so beautifully, Mizrahi, again, the balance between the religion and the day-to-day. We live in a very, very real world with all its challenges and the need to make a living and all of those basic things. But we also live in a world where we have God, where we have Hashem. And I think that that's what the world is seeing as well. And I know many people, from the people that I guide and the people that I speak to when I go out, are struggling, are searching for Hashem in whatever way it is, in whatever religion that they are part of, are searching for Hashem. And they look at us as really God's people. And flawed, absolutely. Nowhere near perfect. And the Bible is all about all the mess ups that everybody did. But that's who we all are as individuals. That's who we are as a people. And I'm just so proud to belong to these people, to this particular camp, and really trying to get the message out in any way that they can, that there is a balance between Tanakh and the modern world. We're not floating around in a bubble. So Rav Doron Perez, thank you so much. Thank you for the book. I highly recommend. I really think this should be required reading, definitely for every 12th grader. Anybody going out into college, anybody really on the verge of adulthood who's trying to understand all the messages that are coming in. I think this clarifies a lot of things. And I thank you so much for putting it out there. It was really very much needed. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to continue working with you in the future. So thank you so much. Okay, and just to my listeners, it is now towards the end of Sivan, on Kafchet Sivan, on the 20th day of Sivan. It is 35 years since we moved to Israel, my husband and I, and at the time 3 children. Thank God 4 more were born here. It is a day that we have made a personal holiday, as great rabbis have said we can do in the past, where we say the Hallel prayer, and it is a personal holiday for us because we feel like we were chosen to come and live in the land, to try and make a difference. And that is what we're doing. And that's, I know, what I've devoted my life to, and what Rav Doron has done as well, in a tremendous way, in a tremendous fashion. So thank you so much. Thank you to all my listeners. And be well wherever you are. Eve Harow, Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network, with thanks to Tabitha and to Ben for getting this show out every single week. All right, I've got to be up early. Got lots to do. Take care, everybody, and goodbye for now.